all our might. Rangers assemble and stand tall, defending the world, answering the call. Together we'll face any foe. In the multiverse, let our legend grow. Go, go, Power Rangers, morphing time through space and dangers. In the multiverse, heroes will fight. Unite together with all our might. Rangers, assemble and stand tall, defending the world.
Yeah, this is Reyes here.
Chris here.
I'm here. Go ahead. We're gonna have to. We need you guys here quick.
What? Why?
Oh, why?
God damn it.
Apparently,
Wait,
No.
wait, I'm busy right here. I'm doing something.
I haven't even finished eating my
hurry
food.
up. Apparently, the person that wants to talk to us is a real sound guy, and I'm not just saying that, pun intended. But you know,
Yeah.
we gotta hurry up.
Okay.
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 All right.
Hi.
Coming.
Hey, will you pass the salt, please?
That's a copy.
On my way.
Fine. I was just halfway reading a freaking book.
Hey, yo, you owe
This
me
is the book of wait.
sitting here trying to get card parts.
Sorry, man. Just get over here.
All right.
All right. Okay,
All
guys.
right, all right. We're coming.
See you.
All right.
All right. We'll go to CC. Let's go. Teleporting now.
Teleporting away.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Power Rangers Multiverse Rangers podcast. My name is Chris. Of course, you know me as the Gold ZT Ranger, and I'm here with my cast and crew. My co-host for tonight is going to be Demi Sam.
Hey, yo.
You know who he is. You know,
Hey,
you love.
everybody.
He's my second in command. And tonight's special guest is, wow, what can I say? This guy has an extensive resume of visual effects. You can see him anywhere from the Saban era of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Zeo, Turbo, whatnot. He's, as you can look in his background, he's done Mojo Jojo, all kinds of stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rick Shick to the show.
Hey everybody,
Thank you very much for
how's it
showing
going?
up.
Too kind, thank you, too kind.
All right, so here's how this is going to work, guys. As I explained to Rick earlier, this is a panel. We're going to have everybody on a hand-raised basis. We're going to start asking questions, and Rick, if he wants to ask us a question, he's welcome to do so as well. Then in about halftime, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to let our sponsors take over, and then Demi will take over the second half. And with that being said, we're going to start off with the first question. I will go, you know what, Rick? I'm going to throw you one. I'll let you go first.
Me? Why am I here? What are we doing? What's happening?
You are an expert in visual effects, and we would like to pick your brain.
All right, well, let's do it. I don't have any questions yet because I just showed up to say hi. So,
Okay, good enough
you
for
guys
me.
ask me questions, and we'll see
All
what's
right,
going on.
let's start with our fearless leader, Rachel, to go first.
Hi, Rick. Welcome to the show. My question is, what was it like doing the visual effects for the putties?
For the putties specifically, it was a ton of fun. And I think it's part of the reason I got hired. So at the end of the second season, or at the end of the first season, the show was a huge hit, much bigger than they thought it was going to be. Wait, did I go out of focus? Why am I out of focus?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. Well, I got out of focus to me. So they knew that I guess they had a plan for Zed's putties to be broken apart, and they had two full-time artists, like fresh out of high school, who worked on the first season with the visual effects supervisor. And it was at a post-production facility that did a lot of, they were across the street from Warner Brothers. So they did editing on a lot of Warner Brothers show, and they started a small effects department at night to work on Power Rangers. So with the second season coming along, and they knew that they wanted to do stop motion for the putties breaking apart. I didn't know any of this. I was just out in LA trying to get a job. I had a giant portfolio of artwork that I would lug around in person. I had a carousel of slides because sometimes people wanted to see your work on slides. Like that's the way it was in the 90s. And so I interviewed for this job. I got this job, and I was initially half assistant to the coordinator, who was an amazing woman. She had an incredible memory. She still has an incredible memory. And I also was an artist. And because I could sculpt, they were like, okay, we'll take this guy because when we need to do the putty breaks, he can do them. So basically, I actually have a recreation of the putties that I used to make. This is my original template. And this is the same material, same size. I would sculpt them about this big.
For those listening on Spotify, Rick is just showing an example of the small breakable Zed putties.
Figurine. Yeah, and it's just an oil-based clay, so it mushes apart very easily. And to do the putties were super fun. I'm a huge fan of Ray Harryhausen, who's right here behind me. Love Ray Harryhausen. Love his stop motion. And so to be able to do stop motion, even on a very teeny tiny cheesy scale, it was blowing my mind that I was going to be paid to do stop motion. I thought it was so cool. So when the putties get hit in the chest and they're reacting, oh, and then they edit the footage, they cut from the putty going like this to just, a blank screen over here. I would take the putty I made, I'd have to line him up to match the position of the actor who was in the putty suit. And we had a camera, a downward facing camera, a giant machine made for doing animation called a Manipulator 3000. And all I would use it for is like aim down at the putty. The putty would be on like a piece of glass with green underneath it with some light on it. So I could see it. And I could look at an overlay of the putty and the last frame of the guy in the putty costume. And I'd line up the putty, and then I'd turn off the overlay, and I could just take a picture frame at a time. And I would move the putty, and in 15 frames or so, he'd completely have to leave the frame. And so that's part of it. There's also an energy aspect to it of the hit would get a hand-drawn glow that would start out on the chest, and then it would spread over the body. And that hides the pop from the actor to the claymation. So, we hit a lot of things with bright energy. Whenever there was an edit that you didn't want to see, like suddenly just bing, someone's not there and something's coming in to replace them. The fact that they don't really line up because there's not a lot of detail. There was not time to do a lot of detail. It's just tube arms and hands. Like the hands were separate color. The face was a separate color. I think we did red eyes sometimes. I guess I should say I did because I think I did most of the putties. French Shumway did a few of them as well. But it was tons of fun. It was tons of fun to do stop motion animation. Loved it.
Cool. Nice.
Nice.
All right.
Thank you.
Nice answer.
Did I even answer the question?
Oh, you answered that perfectly.
Okay, good. One down.
Next question will come from. Let's go with our newest ranger. Let's go with Darius.
Oh, you're muted. Oh, there you are.
So, if I heard correctly, you also did Mojo Jojo.
Well, I made a Mojo Jojo costume in 2010. My daughter wanted to be Buttercup for Halloween. So I'm like, well, if she's going to be Buttercup, I got to do something. So I made, and actually I looked online to see what kind of costumes people had made, and they're all terrible. So there were a lot of cosplayers, and they would just do like a monkey face in like a human proportion with a monkey face. I'm like, that's not Mojo Jojo. He's mostly head with a teeny tiny body. Right. So like this costume, my head is like way up in the brain, and the face is down around my knees.
That's
so that
brilliant.
the proportions are right.
That is brilliant.
I agree.
Yeah, so that's what I made Mojo Jojo for.
So here's my question. Would you ever decide to voice as Mojo Jojo?
Yes, if someone offered me the job, I would love to do it. When I first moved to LA from Michigan, one of the things I did was take a voiceover acting class with a guy named Bob Bergen, who's done a lot of work. I believe he's one of the Animaniacs. He did a lot of Warner Brothers stuff, and I actually had a couple of auditions, but it never went anywhere. But yeah, I love voices. I love doing voices. It's tons of fun.
I like him already.
Awesome. I have a question from one of our fans, and you might know this guy. He may have interviewed you as well. Nick Tillett.
Hey, Nick.
Shout out to Nick Tillett and the Nick channel on YouTube. Check that out.
Yeah, I'm on there somewhere.
But his question is, what show was easier for you to work with, Power Rangers or VR Troopers?
You know, they're very similar to work on as far as the style of stuff. And at the time, Saban, visual effects wise, was very hands off. Like the scripts would just say monster appears or monster disappears. And there wasn't an explanation. So it was up to us to decide, up to my boss. And my boss was very creative, and he instilled creativity in all of us artists working for him. So if we wanted to do something, he was all for it. But as far as like just day to day, they were very similar. I wouldn't say one was harder, more difficult than the other. It's a lot of hand-drawn energy effects. We did stop motion. We did live action puppets. I did a lot of computer graphics for VR Troopers. Actually, when that started, my job was to do the computer animations. And so like if there were streets, if I had to make a map, I'd put all our names in the streets. And back then, Photoshop was only one layer. So if you guys know Photoshop at all, you layer up your work and you can work on different layers. Back then, you'd save your file and it would compress everything to one layer. So you had to make sure everything was where you wanted it. And I mean, that was Photoshop. So I'd have my elements, like there's a tick or something, a giant tick attacking, and I'd move it a little bit, and then I'd save that file and then reopen it as a new file. Then I'd take that one element, move it again, and then save that file. And just the act of saving files was how I did the animation. And actually for Power Rangers, to see if I could actually animate in Photoshop something useful, I remember there's like a Vulcan skull, see a comet flying through the sky at some point, or a meteor flying.
Yeah.
And so they had me try it out to see if I could animate something flying through the sky. And I'm like, okay, I gotta get all mathematical about this. And I like had my frames all on top of each other, and I would draw with a dry erase marker. Okay, here's the meteor on this frame. So when I close the file for the next frame, I could then see like how much I was going to move it across the frame just by drawing on top of my actual monitor. And then the only way to check it without laying it off onto tape was I'd open up all of the files and close them as fast as I could to see motion. And I'm like, okay, I think I got it. And then we went through the rigmarole of taking it from a bunch of files and putting it onto a tape and then watching it, and it was terrible. It was horrible. It was just like zigzagging and jumping around across the screen. So that didn't work at all. But it was fun to try, especially if you know Photoshop. The idea of there being no layers that stay live is just crazy.
Well, thank you, Nick, for your question, and we appreciate you watching us and viewing our podcast. Next question is going to come from. Let me see. Let's go with Joseph. Go with Jisoo down at the bottom there.
Hello, Mr. Shick. I also know that you worked on a very big sitcom show called Home Improvement.
Yeah, I did a few shots on that.
This is nostalgia.
I'm going to be guessing that you did all of the different cutscenes.
I did very little of it. Trent Shumway did they called him Homie, the little home improvement stop motion character. Trent Shumway animated that. So he would do the interstitials, or like the jumping from scene to scene. I did a couple. I did one where I think Tim gets sucked into a sofa and like the scene gets like wrinkled up like paper and crumbles with him into a sofa. I can't remember what else I did. I know I did a few effects on that, but not a lot, but I did do some.
Thank you for the
Well,
question.
your reputation speaks for itself.
Well, thank you very much. You're very kind. I'm just working stiff.
I'm going to read off another question for a guest who cannot make for one of our panel who cannot make it tonight. Unfortunately, he's under the weather. I do have a couple of questions, but I'll save his second one for the second half. And then after that, then Bruce will take the next question. So the question this is from our brother Jahil, Elijah. Get well soon. The question is, how do you feel knowing that because of your stellar effect work on shows like Power Rangers, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, etc., the childhood of millions became much more special as a result? Can you explain?
It's really touching. Usually as visual effects artists, like a lot of times our names aren't even in credits. Like there was a time when my name would be in the credits and I'd go to the movies with my kids and we'd see my name go by and woo, everyone's all excited. And then as time went on, that just meant less to me. And it was more about spending time with my family and not spending as many hours working on stuff. And a lot of us just work, and generally we work in dark rooms and we're just sitting, like little vermin working on computers and just getting one thing done after another as fast as we can. And to actually go to be invited to a convention and see what an effect it had on people, it just blows me away. It's so touching. It's incredible. So, and then I was until the recent, with the Hollywood strikes and the shutdowns, and eventually I got canned from my job as a creative director. I had teams of artists and I would tell them, like, you guys, it feels like we're just doing nothing that no one's ever going to see, but you don't know what an effect it's going to have on somebody. And know that someone out there is going to appreciate the hard work that you're doing beyond the fact that, we're just having a good time being visual effects artists. We're working hard and we're in the dark and we're under a deadline. But there are so many people that you would never even guess enjoy your work. Like I had no idea. I had no clue that it had this big of an effect on people. So it is. Well, it's really gratifying. It's really cool.
You have a very vast audience. Like I tell you, even fans as far as England. I'm telling you, and that's our leader lives.
I am from England.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, Bruce, you have the next question. You got the floor is yours.
All right. So first and foremost, welcome. It's a pleasure.
Thanks.
What was your inspiration to get into visual effects?
Oh man. So as I've already said, I loved Ray Harryhausen as a kid. I went to see Clash of the Titans in the theater in what was that, 78 or something? I don't know. Remember, I think it was early 80s. Because I was able to walk to the theater. It was like a few miles from my house, and my neighbor and we were best friends, and we would walk to the theater, and it was like $1, and we'd go see it like every day that summer. Like, oh my gosh, it's such an amazing movie. So that was a huge influence that blew me away. And then in high school, 1987 was an awesome year for movies. It was also just happened to be the year I graduated from high school, and Evil Dead 2 just blew my mind. It was so funny and it was so gross. I love horror movies. I thought Evil Dead 2 was incredible. And oh no, you're wrong. It's great. It's so funny. Come on, he's fighting his own hand. I do not love that. That's the greatest thing. He's hitting himself with the plates. So anyway, so that with Sam Raimi, following Sam Raimi's career and being like, okay, this guy's from Michigan. I'm from Michigan. He's making movies. I can make movies. Or at least maybe I can help people make movies, I think. Like if things don't work out and I don't get to direct the Spider-Man movie in 1986, at least I think I can help other people make movies. So so it was always in the back of my mind, but it never seemed like something that you really do. Like, like how do you don't just go to California and start making movies. So in college, I remember seeing, and I loved sci-fi movies, like anything with, whatever the visual magic is going on, I was crazy for it. Like Dragon Slayer was that blew my mind. That was incredible. And like seeing the advances of stuff, I was always like up on like Willow with the CG animation and the morphing and like, oh, how'd they do that? And even I think it was Young Sherlock Holmes had the first fully animated CG character in a live action movie of a stained glass guy who's like walking. And I remember watching it again and again, like, how did they do that? That blows my mind. That's so cool. And it was with RoboCop 2. I was in college and I found at a local bookstore, I found this magazine called Cinefex. And it was all about how movies are made. And there was an article about RoboCop 2. And I just devoured that. Like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. That stop motion animation was so spectacular. It just, it cut seamlessly from a live action guy to a 2D, stop motion puppet. I was just enamored with that. Thought that was the coolest thing. And that was when I'm like, hey, maybe I can make movies for a living. Like maybe I really could do movies for a living. Maybe it's, that was for me, RoboCop 2 and that Cinefex is what turned the light bulb on in my head beyond just the fantasy of like, oh, Sam Raimi makes movies and I can make movies. It's like, you know what? Maybe I really do. I think I do want to do this. If I had known earlier, I would have studied film in college, but I didn't. But yeah, so I'd say like the big turning point was RoboCop 2, but definitely Ray Harryhausen. And this is a signed picture of Sam Raimi right there. So I got my heroes behind me. Got Stan Lee signed this in the San Diego Comic-Con in '96 when most people didn't really know who he was if you went to the Comic-Con. So you could just walk right up to him and talk to him.
May the legend rest in peace.
Yeah, definitely incredible.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Bruce, and thank you for the answer. Next question's coming from our second in command, Demi. Go for it. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, Mr. Shick. I'm Demi. I'll be your co-host for the second half. I do have a question for one of our cast members because today is his graduation from high school, so he cannot make it in tonight. This is from my boy Zane. And working with a company or a project such as Power Rangers, when did you realize that would become such a fan favorite as quickly as it did?
You know what? I didn't know until it lasted so long. I had heard about it in the news. I wasn't the age to watch it, so I wasn't really interested in it. But like one of my friends was like, oh, I'm going to, my friend Walter got a part in the show and we're going to go celebrate. And so, okay, cool. And it turns out that it was Walter Jones and it was his part that he got was the Black Ranger and she knew him. And, but it was just some guy, like we're just a bunch of guys in LA trying to make something happen, no one really knew. So a year later, when I was, trying to get my first job when I went to LA was I worked on the Fantastic Four movie, the very, 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 very first one. I was a casting assistant on that. But then I spent my time trying to go around to different places to get work. And the whole catch-22 was, well, once you've done something, come back and let us know. And it's like, well, how do I do that? So when I got hired for Power Rangers, I'm like, oh, it's that kids show that people seem to like. And the reason I got hired was the first season was so much bigger than they thought it was going to be that they knew they were going to need more artists to work on the second season because they wanted to go bigger and do more stuff. And so I just happened to be along at the right time to be a part of that. Now, being along at the right time means I had spent like a year and a half trying to get work, in the industry before that finally happened. But, you got to fail many, many times to finally get your chance to success and just keep going. Just because something fails doesn't mean you stop.
Words to live by.
I believe it was 2001 was the first time I worked with someone who watched Power Rangers growing up. And I'm like, oh man, I'm old. And this show's still going on. In like 2010, my youngest son was watching the Samurai Rangers. And, you know, this the fact that it was still around and early on, I believe Haim Saban said he had a 10-year plan for Power Rangers. And people were like, 10 years, you're crazy.
A little secret, Rick.
Yep.
I'm 46. I started watching Mighty Morphin at 15 years old.
Nice. Yeah, see, like I was 20 something.
You may
Like I
consider
was
me the oldest
23,
Power
22. Yeah.
Uh,
15,
ano-
that's
ano-
makes
another
sense.
little secret, I Rick, is that I'm 43, and I watched it when it first came. I watched Power Rangers since it first came out in the 90s.
So you're not alone, my friend. Not by a long shot.
I like to tell people I'm 60 because then they say, wow, you look really good for 60, but I'm 55. So when I was 45, I started telling people I was 50. So once I hit 50, I'm like, well, I got to start telling people I'm 60. So they tell me how good I look for how old I am.
Which leads me into a question I have about the show that you mentioned, and I wanted to get your take on this a bit. And then after that question, it'll be Raph's turn to take the floor. But my question to you is on one of your clips that I watched. It was on your YouTube channel. You explained something about setting a Power Ranger on fire, and you couldn't do that. Can you explain that to me a little bit more?
Yeah, totally. So I seem to recall we had an element, we had a library full of elements. So I'll show you, we had tapes. Sorry, not going to be gone too long. We had tapes like this, they're called digibeta.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what the show would be stored on, or visual effects would be stored on these. These are huge standard def, these huge tapes. So we'd have a library of these, and they'd have elements that people had shot for different shows. People at different facilities would share with each other. And so you'd reuse the same elements over and over again. And occasionally you'd do a shoot and you'd make your own new elements. And so those would get added to the library of stuff that you would use. So we had a bunch of different fire, and we would reuse the same elements over and over again. And at some point it was like, hey, you can't put the Rangers on fire. Like, stop doing that. I don't know. Like there was always controversy of like, is the show too violent for kids? And I always thought, well, I watched Yosemite Sam shooting everyone in the face with a shotgun when I was growing up, and I never shot anyone. Never occurred to me. I mean, my dad had guns. There was a shotgun in the house. He was like a skeet shooting champion, and so it would never have occurred to me to take the gun and shoot anyone. You don't do that, but you know, cartoons, they do it. That's fine. So anyway, wait, where were we going? I had a point, and see, I just went off on that tangent that took me out of wherever the heck I was going.
It's okay. We were talking about the Rangers on fire.
Right. So we would reuse the same elements again and again, setting the Rangers on fire, or like monsters would appear in fire or disappear in fire, and there are elements that we would layer into the film. And I mean, that's just one of the standard effects we do. So we were told you can't set them on fire. So I changed the fire to green and did it for the Green Ranger. And I made it kind of like localized, like I put it on his gauntlets first. And then it kind of was like an ember that grew across his body with some green flame coming off it. And because it didn't come back as like, hey, you know, we told you no fire. I'm like, sweet, I got to set a Ranger on fire again. And a lot of what we did was for our own amusement.
Now,
we did a lot of effects just because it made us laugh.
Now, I'm assuming correctly that this was the Green Zeo Ranger that was set on fire.
I believe you are correct. There's some boxing scene.
Oh, that's correct.
Yeah, that's
something like that. Yeah,
I remember. All right. Next question comes from Raph. Raph, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, it's a great honor to have you with us here, Rick.
Thank you.
How did you do the effects for the Zords of the Rangers?
When the Zords change from one to the other? So there is there's an explanatory video that's on my Instagram that you can watch. It'll go into it more. But I have some of the props. These were toys that we turned into puppets. So this was a toy that I got in a store in Santa Monica called Puzzle Zoo. And if you look at this side, it's not painted up. And this
Okay.
side, it's like weathered, and we try to make it look like a big robot. And whoever made this one resculpted the arms, so the arms are a little bit longer. And there's some mechanisms that are being hidden on the backside that they put in to make them move. So let's see, this this opens the mouth. And then that makes his arm go. And there's some puppetry in the legs here. So these were live action puppets that we had made, or toys that we turned into puppets. And we did it with, like, I did this one because this one was easy.
To
So I
anybody
did
on
the easy one
Spotify
myself.
who's listening right now, he is showing the props of the Zords that we use.
I'm sorry?
The first Zord prop he showed was the
T-Rex.
Tyrannosaurus from Mighty Morphin
Yeah,
Power Rangers.
Tyrannosaurus.
The current, and then the second prop is the Unicorn Thunder Zord from season 2.
Yeah, right. So we would have these two things, these two toys. We would shoot each of them separately, and they're live action puppets. So they're toys turned into live action puppets, and we would layer them. I made a mountain range, and we shot the mountain range with the camera moving by the mountain range. So when the toy's just sitting there, and you don't notice the camera's moving and the mountain range isn't, it just looks like the mountain range is going by in the background. We shot some dust. We painted a sky on a big piece of cloth, and that was a scrim in the background to create some parallax with the miniature mountain range.
Okay.
And then someone, I'm guessing maybe our boss, Brian Longbotham, probably did the morphing, because I think back then morphing was pretty difficult, and most of us didn't have a clue how to do it. And so he would do that. And then I believe Trent Shumway drew the final electricity. Like all the electricity in the show was hand-drawn frame at a time.
Nice.
So a lot of us we're just animating, like we're drawing frame at a time to make a lot of the electricity stuff happen. So when the Zords change from one to the other, the final layer, that final that makes it Power Rangers, is that bolt of electricity that comes in and crawls over it as it changes from one to the other.
Morphs into its new Zord. Nice.
Well, you did a phenomenal job.
Thank you for that question, Raph. 2 more questions, and then we're going to take a break for the first half. The first question before the break is going to be from Bakugo.
Hi. It's an honor to meet you. It really was, you gave me my childhood, and I want to thank you for that. Really, you did growing up.
Yeah, I'm just one of many people who did it, but thank you very much. On behalf of all of us, I'll take it.
My question is for future up-and-coming artists and stop motion artists, what is the one tip you can give me to start?
Go bug places that do the work. Go become an intern somewhere. Go bring people coffee and let them know you're interested in doing it. Go do, take the reception job that seems unrelated, but you're in the environment. And if you show that you have interest in what's going on in the back, usually those people are more than happy to help you. And the bosses don't mind hiring you because you're less expensive. Like that's how I got the job, because I was just doing like minimum wage or whatever at the time, because it was they wanted cheap, fast artists, and I was an artist with some skills. They didn't know if they would be the right skills or not until we actually tried it out. But if it didn't work, it wouldn't cost them much money that they would have spent on me to get going. So right. I even told my daughter is an amazing 2D animator. She's a 3D animator. She's working for a company called Jersey House right now. I was thinking like right out of high school, I'm like, man, you should just go get a job because you're so good. But she needed to spend time with other artists, and where she grew up, there weren't other artists like her. Like she kind of stood out on her own. And my wife is the smart one, and she's like, no, she should go to school and she should meet other people like her before she goes out and starts working. So for some people, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, it's, go find the environment where it's happening. You can't just sit in your room and hope that someday someone's going to find you. I think if the 80s movies taught me anything, it was that coincidence makes everything happen. There's always quicksand around the corner, and every car has a ramp on the back. So if you're in an accident, cars are going to go flying in the air. None of those things are true. All three of those things don't actually exist in the real world. There's not enough coincidence. So you got to go make it happen. And by making it happen, it's like if Lycos is a cool place that's making 2D stop motion stuff you want to do, you got to go there. You know, like Sony for Into the Spider-Verse. Like, who knew that they were going to have, they have everything in that movie. You know, there's 3D, there's 2D, there's stop motion, there's Lego. And I mean, it's not Lego because they use Blender. I wish they'd really just done Legos. Like, that would have been great. Like, that would have been cool.
I agree.
Like, and it's so much easier now. Back then, I had to get a big fat book called like Hollywood 411 and look up companies and call the phone number and even see if they were still there, if the book was still correct or not, you know? And now you can go find these places online. A lot of places they'll even have a page just to apply for work. And you can, you know, and so make something. This is something else I try to teach my daughter is if you start to make something, finish it. Don't have something that's it's better to have something really short that's really well done than something long and crummy, or something that's the start. Or I have an idea. Everyone has an idea. The idea is the easy part. It's the actual making of something. That's what's impressive.
That's nice. All right. And to close out, hang on, Zordon. To close out our segment in our first half, our last question will be from Okami. The floor is yours.
What was your favorite show or movie to work on as a visual effect artist?
So as a visual effects artist, you know, the whole Saban era was a ton of fun because they kind of left us alone when we got to make stuff up. There was not a lot of back and forth. It was just go get it done. You know, every once in a while they wouldn't like something we had done or we'd have to revise something, but there was not a lot of revision, and the ability to just do anything was really cool. So that's one of them. The other I would have to say was Zathura. When I worked at Sony ImageWorks for, I don't know, probably a couple of decades, off and on as a freelancer in a compositing capacity. And I was in a department called Flame, and we basically had the compositing software where if they shot layers of elements or they made CG and it all fit together, it would go to another department because that was easy and they could pump through it. But if they shot something wrong and they needed help making it work, that's what we did in Flame. And working in Flame and as a freelancer, working in Flame on Zathura, and there was stop motion. I think there was some stop motion with the robot. At least there were miniatures. There were like live action miniatures. There was Stan Winston, you know, puppets. The Zorgons, I believe they were called, were big puppets, and the blending of puppets and CG together instead of just full on CG made it look so much more real. Like when you have a base to start with, that's real. I loved that. And I was on that project from the beginning to the end. A lot of times I'd come in to Sony to work on a film when everything's on fire and, oh my gosh, we got to get all this done. And it's like, hey, help, you know, stay late and help us get all this done. So Zathura was not on fire the whole time. It was a little more leisurely. And I had a really big shot of a robot going through a couple of walls. And it was one of the things where the supervisor's like, okay, here's the elements. It looks like a mess. We'll see you in a few weeks. And just to have that kind of, you know, like that trust where they trusted me of like, here, we're going to give you something difficult and just go away for a while. And then we know you'll get it. Like that was really cool. And on that show, I remember they did a couple of, they had some lightning. The robot needed some like electrical energy on it. And I remember seeing it, and they were using some plug-in in Flame where you could like set a couple of points and make electricity through it. And I'm looking at it in dailies, like in a theater. We'd go to a theater with a group of the artists, And I remember looking at it and just thinking like, oh, that lightning's terrible. I could draw lightning way better than that. And they're like, oh yeah, well, why don't you? It's like, oh, can I volunteer to do the lightning for this? So then like, well, here, you try some lightning on this if you're so good at it. And I'm like, oh, baby. And so I got to do a shot with some lightning in it, and it was all hand-drawn lightning. And from that point on, they're like, all right, you're doing all the other lightning shots. And it's like, well, can I redo the other one? Like, no, that one's already approved. And, keep moving on. We're not going back.
All right.
So that, like with the miniatures, and my friend Joe Bauer was the main visual effects supervisor on that. And John Favreau came by to watch the movie with us while it was in progress, which was incredibly cool because no one to have that kind of care for the artist making it. That was really special. It was really neat.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that answer, that question, Okami. Well, it's about time to take our break to get our sponsors in. So, with that being said, let's take that break. We will be back on the Power Rangers Multiverse Rangers podcast with our guest Rick Shick, with our co-host Demi taking over. Till then, hang tight, and we'll be back.
I can finally get my pants off.
Is Chris and Becky in the training room working hard and training. Now feeling out of breath and exhausted. Jahil decides to join them with a hydrate while sipping on his galaxy granny. Chris sees the exhausted. Jahil sees the exhausted Rangers, and he couldn't help but snicker.
Jahil, hi. You're so energized. How is that possible?
Yeah, man. Usually at this point in the week, I'm beat. What is your secret?
Jahil sips his galaxy grenade.
I am so glad you guys asked. I keep myself energized and hydrated with Dubby. This one in particular is Galaxy Grenade.
Dubby? What's that?
It's a top-of-the-line energy drink and energy booster that gives me what I need to tackle the day and own the week, as well as take care of any villains that come along the way. It's also good for content creators and gamers of all sorts. It is jitterless energy made with coffee fruit extract that comes in so many delicious flavors and no added preservatives. Here, I think you guys could enjoy some of this delicious Galaxy Grenade that I have here.
Gee.
Thanks, Elijah. But a quick question. What if there are financial struggles? Heroes on a budget and all?
Yeah, I know,
Is there a
right?
way we can save a few bucks?
Oh, there definitely is. You can go to www.dubby.gg and enter the promo code PRMultiverse. All caps, no spaces. By doing this, you will save 10% off your entire order, and they also have great swag that you can show your support for Dubby proudly.
Like t-shirts and hats?
Correct.
As this being said, a distress seems to be coming on the computer screen.
Oh boy, this isn't good. Okay, guys, we need to report to Ops and get our mission. Riz, you're here. Run away. I hope you guys are energized. It's morphin' time.
Remember to go to www.w.gg, place the promo code PRMultiverse and save 7% on your purchase. W Energy, delicious Jerry Energy.
By the way, Rick Shick, once again, it's a pleasure to have you with us, Rick. We will now take some more questions from the cast.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Hey. First up, let's give it up to our boss, Rachel. What's your question?
I saw on Instagram that you interviewed Hunter Dino. What was that like?
I'm sorry. What was what like?
Your interview with Hunter Dino.
Oh, my interview with Hunter Dino, that was a ton of fun. She's really cool. I didn't know anything about her. I didn't know her before she showed up. We met her, or I met her the day before. She was doing signing at a comic book, and through like an intermediary, we had sort of talked with her about coming over to the studio for an interview. So we went to meet her and remind her, hey, coming around for the interview. And you know what? She was super cool. She was really nice. Like I said, I don't know anything about newer Power Rangers. So I just found her to be an excellent human being.
Oh, cool.
That is fantastic to hear. Next on the list, Raphael, what is your question for the interview?
What was it like working with the castmates of Power Rangers?
Yeah, I didn't really work with them. So they would shoot their stuff in Valencia, and I was in a post-production facility in Burbank. So occasionally we go on set for advice for something. I remember being there for a Zord fight between the Tiger Zord and some other Zord that didn't happen in Japan. So they sent the suits to the studio and they shot the fight in a miniature city, and the guy fell down and blew up part of the city. And we're gonna have I videotaped it. So we're gonna have that on the Behind the Power VFX at some point. That's gonna be one of the episodes, is the behind the scene fight. But yeah, usually we weren't on set. I went on set more so for the other Saban shows, not so much Power Rangers.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that is cool. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that question, and thank you for that answer. Zoe, what is your question?
Hi, welcome, Rick Shick. My question is, what is your one advice for a up and coming scene director or a content creator, basically?
My one piece of advice: finish it. Whatever it is you're making, finish it. It's better to have something done that's short than something long and a mess. And if you get into something and it's like, oh man, this is harder than I thought it would be, I don't care. Keep going, get it done. Doesn't matter how hard it is, finish it. Because if you have a finished project, that means so much more to anyone that you're going to want to show it to. Because honestly, your parents will watch it, sure. If you like get like, I have an idea and I did half of it, no one's going to be interested except for your family. So if you want anyone who is seeing it with fresh eyes, who doesn't know anything about it, all they'll see is that you're someone who didn't finish something. So I would recommend, so the number one piece of advice is finish it. The number two piece of advice would be keep it short and manageable so you can finish it.
Okay, thank you.
And whatever it is, whether it's a video or a costume or whatever, you know, don't just talk about it, get it done, do it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna interfere on the list on this one. We're gonna insert one because this one was not here in the first half, but he's here.
Chris, you read my mind. I know what you're about to say too.
Yeah. So Zane, go ahead and take the question.
Hello, Mr. Shick. My question to you is, what?
Oh no, there's like an airplane going overhead or something. I didn't hear that at all. It like went.
Repeat your question, Zane.
Sorry, technical difficulties suck. Anywho, my question is, what is your favorite part of doing what it is you do?
My favorite part is that I don't know what's happening next. Is that it's the variety. Like the reason I've stayed a visual effects artist for over 30 years is there's always something different going on. And I can't say what I'm doing right now, but it's a brand new sort of thing. And it's super interesting because of that. I know that with my background and my interests, if I can do something for real, I always want to shoot it for real. If I can shoot a miniature, if I can shoot something and not just recreate it in a computer, I prefer to do that. But my favorite thing is that I'm always learning something new. I'm always applying old knowledge, and it keeps things fresh.
All right, excellent.
Okay. Thank you for that help with that list, Chris. Next up is Joseph. What is your question for our specialist?
Yes, I know that you worked on Power Rangers Turbo, and I was just wondering how you did all those effects with Divatox and all the other villains in that show.
Now Zordon.
I don't know that I like Divatox. Is that like the guy whose face opens up sideways and he's lava or something?
No.
Who's Divatox? I don't know who Divatox is.
She's the main villain of Turbo. She's like the
Hillary Shepard.
I remember there was a big dinner. See, I didn't watch the show, so I don't know what to tell you. I do remember there was some guy. I thought he was in Turbo. There was like some guy who appeared in the sky in a big circle of flame, and he obviously had a puppet head. And I remember I did that because when he appeared in the sky, it reminded me of what is that movie that I love so much? Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And so in the slate, I was like, I had him saying like, "What are you doing?" And then like the little Rangers, whoever, were saying, you know, "We're averting our eyes, O Lord." And I had him say, "Well, cut that out." I do remember some guy ran kind of fast. There was like a speedy dude. And I always like those kind of effects because I would try to, instead of just doing a 1-frame cutout of someone and then moving them around, I would try to roto maybe 10 frames of them so they'd have a little bit of movement as they slid. And I felt like, ooh, that's a big development because it doesn't just look like, it looks like the guy might be moving because he actually was moving. So it kind of helps sell the effect. And because I know by Turbo, I was a better visual effects artist. So I know that I did have the opportunity to try to do more things. But like, as far as like specific characters go, I'd have to see it again to remember because I don't really recall.
Appreciate the question and the answer. Next up is Darius.
Okay, so let's see. What's my question? Okay, so one question I have for you is: has there ever been any moments where there is a messed up on stage, like any malfunctions? I'm just curious.
Yeah, constantly. That is a huge part of doing visual effects. People change their mind. People decide to shoot something without a supervisor being on set. So sometimes they're guessing at what to do. I remember at one point we had the Green Ranger on a green screen, and it's like you can't do that. And I think someone said, like, why don't you paint blue around him and then key that? And it's like, it just shows how much they don't understand the process. Because if I'm painting something, I might as well just roto scope the person out of the scene. It's like you're making extra work to make extra work sometimes because people don't quite know what they're doing. It happens all the time. I remember when I was very excited to work on Harry Potter, and it was the kids flying around, and they were on broomsticks that were on giant blue poles. Well, the kids wrapped their legs around the poles to kind of hold on to them. So now there's a pole in the way, and there's a pole in front of their cape, like fluttering behind it. There's just a giant missing section where the blue pole is. So we're remaking legs and animating legs and remaking capes and animating capes in 2D. And I'm just thinking, wow, this is just like Power Rangers. We're just fixing a whole lot of, things that were shot incorrectly because at the time it's the decision of, instead of hanging the kids from wires, we'll put them on poles. I'm certain that was part of it, was like, it'll be easier on the kids. But then the downside is now their legs are missing and someone needs to remake their legs. And fortunately, people like me can look at them and look at legs in other scenes and steal that and repaint it and, repaint the lighting and make it fit and make it so that no one notices that, oh, you know what? They were very stiff and their capes just disappeared for a moment. But, we would remake it and patch all that, and then no one would ever notice.
Yeah, nice. Thank you for that question. That wonderful answer. I'm gonna interject here because the other person, he's not here. He wasn't. And so, about to go. You're up again, my guy. What's your question?
My next question was, I've always wanted to know, what is it like working with Saban? What is it really like?
You know what? I was only in a couple of meetings with the actual man himself. I found him to be hilarious. He definitely took control of a room. I'm Saban. I'm gonna do this. We made up a whole language to just mimic the speed with which he spoke and got ideas out. I do recall him staring directly at me when he asked the room a question, and he's like, "Who's got a watch?" And he looks right at me, and I'm like, "No, I don't have a watch, sir. I don't know." And he's just like immediately on to the next person. "You got a watch? Who's got a watch? Time me." He's like, "We are VR. How long did that take?" And it's like 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Next. Like there'd be a whole giant discussion about how long the virtualizer and VR Trooper is going to take. And he had enough of the conversation that was just going in circles, and he just stomped on it, got an answer and put an end to it and on to the next agenda item. I found him highly entertaining. I thought it was always funny whenever he was around. I think the 2 times maybe that I was in a meeting with him.
That's actually funny. Okay. Our next question comes from my partner in this interview, the host, Chris. What is your question?
Well, in the first half, of this, you went to Rangers. You were going to Ranger Stop and Pop. This half, you were at Ranger Stop and Pop, and you did a putty fight scene, and you recreated it. Tell us more.
Oh my gosh, that was so much fun. So I was thinking about, what am I going to do for a panel? I have an opportunity to do my own panel. What can make it the most fun for me? What can make it most fun for the people who are coming? What can make it fun for the Rangers? So my idea was, instead of just talking about like stop motion animation or, one of the things I've done, I'm like, why don't I do stop motion animation? And if I'm going to do stop motion animation, why not have a putty fight? So I recruited a ranger, Hector David Jr., to be the special guest ranger who was going to come and beat the crap out of a putty who was going to be in my panel. So my next
Who did you find to wear the putty
making
mask?
it fun. I'm sorry?
Who did you find to wear the putty costume?
So I put out a call on my Instagram saying I needed a putty cosplayer, and a few people were interested, but they weren't able to come, the people who had costumes. So I figured, all right, I got to make a Z and I got to make a putty mask. So I made a putty mask and a Z out of just stuff laying around the house, out of cardboard and foam tubes. And so that I would at least have that much. Like that's all I really need for you to be a putty. And then one of my partners, Tim Embry, had a gray costume. He had a gray onesie. So I'm like, great, bring it. And while we were at Ranger Stop and I'm setting up, I was asking people, do you want to be a putty? Do you want to be a putty? I'm like, I found a cosplayer. Do you want to be a putty? And then Carnell Holly was coming by and he said hi to me and he wanted to interview me like later for his Instagram thing. I'm like, do you want to be a putty? He's like, yes, I do. So I had one cosplayer ahead of him who was like trying to figure out if he could do it. And it turned out he didn't have time at the right time during my panel. So then I'm like, Carnell, it's you. You're the lucky putty. So the whole panel was basically set up. I even had an actor being me. I had a guy on stage pretending he's me giving a presentation because I'm now being the director and the cameraman and the VFX guy. So I shot it all, and I'm directing them, and the people that were there for the panel, they're the audience members who get attacked by the putty. And it was a lot of fun. And Hector David Jr. is freaking awesome. He just comes flipping in at full speed, like literally almost ran me down. He was coming at me so fast. And so much energy and so much enthusiasm. That guy is just totally excited to be alive. I am with him. He's awesome. So yeah, so it was tons of fun. And after we shot the scene, just like if someone was giving a presentation at the Angel Grove High School, you know, and then a putty attacks, that's basically how we shot it. And Hector even talked about what it was like shooting things behind the scenes. He was telling them how quick paced it was, and you'd come in and you just know there's going to be a fight, but you'd work out the choreography that day while you're there shooting it.
Right.
So he's like, yeah, it was super high speed environment. So it's lots of fun.
There are clips of this that you can see on your YouTube channel.
The whole thing's there. The whole putty fight is on the Behind the Power VFX. Yep.
There you go. Thanks, Rick.
Yeah. Rick. And it was fun to do the first putty explosion in like 30 years or so, you know?
Right.
Fantastic. So I'm going to interject here one more time before we continue on with the next one. I'm going to give it up to the boss again. Rachel, what is your question?
My question is that you were like saying about you going to Ranger stuff, but all over your social medias or over TikTok and all this stuff. There was one part I saw, it was with the flies, the effect of the flies, and you ran off. How did you do that?
You know what? I didn't even do it. So one of my partners, Devante, he came over to my house. He doesn't live very far away. He was like 15 minutes away. So he came over because he's like, we got to shoot some promos for Ranger Stop. And my whole idea was, I literally hate the ones where people are walking and they're explaining something to you like you're an idiot and they're very condescending. And it's like, I'm so important, I can't stop walking to talk to you, so I got to keep walking. I hate that kind of video. So I'm like, let's do that kind of video, but I want to do it wrong every single way. So that in that particular one, I'm like, okay, let's go out front and I'll just pretend I'm being attacked by flies and or bees or whatever. And Devante's like, oh, I can find an element and just put it on there. So we just shot the plate with no bugs, and I just acted like there were bugs on me. And I don't know. You have to ask Devante. You could text him in the comments on the video. But somewhere online, he found an element that I'm sure was just already had a mat on it, and he just stuck it on there. And he showed it to me once, and I'm like, triple the amount of bugs. I'm like, it's not nearly enough bugs. So then he showed me another one. It had a bunch more bugs. I'm like, yep, that's it. That's the one.
Perfect. That's funny. Thank you, Rachel, for that question. Hey, thank you for that hilarious answer, Rick. Rafael, my God, what is your question?
Who's next, Demi?
Rafael is next on the list.
All right. Out of all the people you've worked with, your co-workers, who was the biggest prankster?
Me. I am. I spent about 6 months pranking one of my buddies in an office where we're in a cubicle, and let's see, in front, his back was against a wall, and in front of him was a row of monitors, and then opposite him was another guy facing him. And I would move their two desks together backward so that the guy had less and less room behind him. And I did it for weeks, and he didn't notice. I would do a little bit. He even had a board with like Post-it notes on it. I would move all of that stuff with him. And so one day I decided, all right, I'm going to move it all the way back and see if he notices, because it's going to be such an extreme change. And he still didn't notice. So then I moved it again further back and just kept going back and back. And we even put a sofa behind the other guy and hang out in, because we had so much room. We're like, oh, great, we got a lounge on the other side of this. So that was part of it. And it's funny because when you walked by the cubicle, it used to be in the doorway, you would look and you would see the middle row of monitors with the guys on either side. But eventually you didn't see the one guy at all because he was so far back. And it wasn't until, weeks or months later that he was sitting there working at his computer, and the supervisor came into his area to look at his screen with him. And the supervisor was like, I can't even get behind you. What's going on here? And he just like, what's going on? I can't even move, man. He was so mad. And oh my gosh, I laughed so hard because I was so happy he finally noticed that he had no room whatsoever. And I got to tell him, dude, I've been doing it to you for months.
And in fact, he didn't know it's even funnier. Raphael, thank you for your question.
We hosted a birthday party for one of the artists on the other side because there was so much room once. With the sofa, and we put in a little table and brought the cake out. And I'm like, and he didn't notice. He didn't notice that he had no room. He just was so focused on the work, I guess. He just wanted to work and get out, work and get out. He didn't have any room.
Thank you, Rick, for your answer, and Raphael, thank you for your question. Next up, is Zoe again. What is your next question?
My next question is, out of all the scenes you've worked on and all the stuff you've done, what was your favorite out of all of it?
All the things I've done. I'd say my favorite project was probably Zathura because it was a mix of CG and puppets. And I also got to draw electricity for the robot, and I put my name in the robot's chest plate. Just the variety in the miniatures, and I got to go on set, and I saw Stan Winston, alien costumes in person, just like, oh my gosh, it was so cool. And the whole house was on a giant gimbal. So that was super special. That was a ton of fun. Green Lantern, I always consider it the highlight of my career because my design was chosen for the crew t-shirt. Sony would always have a competition not always, but at some point they'd have a competition for the t-shirt design. And some of the designs were just amazing because there were such fantastic artists. And so on Green Lantern, when my t-shirt idea was chosen for the crew shirt, I was like, ooh, like I'm done. I've hit the pinnacle. My t-shirt has been selected. Because I love t-shirts. I'm a giant fan of t-shirts and like making t-shirt art. I've been doing it forever. So that was super exciting.
Thank you for your question, Zoe, and your answer, Rick. And Joseph, what is your next question?
Yes. My question is, you were approached by both DC and Marvel to do effects for their movies and shows. How did you approach the Warner Brothers set for the DC stuff versus how you approached the MCU lot?
Sure, that sounds like a great question, but it's a completely different situation than what you're thinking it is. Because I'm not an actor, so I'm not going to their lots where they're shooting stuff. In both instances, I was working at Sony ImageWorks. So Sony ImageWorks was hired by Marvel to do Captain America. So I already had a previous relationship with Sony. So generally they'd give me a call when they had effects. So it was the same with DC with Superman Returns. It was a Sony project. Sony had a certain number of shots that they were doing. And so Sony hired me. So to me, it was all the same. And whether it was Spider-Man or Captain, because Spider-Man was pre-Marvel, right? It was pre-Marvel Studios. Captain America was the first Marvel Studio picture that Sony ImageWorks worked on. So that was like the official Marvel Studio movie. But basically, I just go around to visual effects companies. I'm not going to, like, I don't know the people at Marvel. I don't know the people at DC. I know the people in the effects houses that Marvel hires to do stuff. And even I directed a cinematic for the video game Superman Returns. And that too I was working for a company called Arnson Communications, and EA was our client, and EA owned the studio that was making Superman Returns. So in that case, I did go to Florida where the studio was to see what they had that we could use to make a story for the cinematic for the video game. And they had models of Metropolis. They had, they had like scenes of animation together. They told us what villains were in the movie so that when we're trying to decide what the cinematic's going to be, that we highlight a villain that they wanted to use. And in their case, they wanted Metallo. And I really wanted, they had Bizarro Superman was in it. And I really wanted Bizarro at the end to like break through the wall and be, it's like me, I'm game. Or, saying something Bizarro-ish at the end, kind of ruining everything. And that's how it was until maybe 2/3 of the way through. They're like, you know what? We don't want to give Bizarro away in the cinematic. We want to save that for later. So they cut that part out. I was so sad because I was so happy to have Bizarro in my project.
Oh, that would have been awesome to have him in the project.
I mean, I have that video somewhere. I just need to find it.
Thank you, Rick, for your question, and thank you, Joseph, for your answer. We have time for maybe a couple more questions. Am I got any more questions?
Yeah, we got one from the boss. Rachel, go ahead.
I saw on your Instagram post that you wore your Mojo Jojo costume. You were getting interviewed by someone who was dressed as a Joker.
Yep. Yeah. That's what was that? Nerd Caliber.
Yeah.
It was let's see. So in 2010, my daughter wanted to be Buttercup for Halloween. And I'm like, all right, if you're going to be Buttercup, I want to be him. But I was way too fat to be him. I still am. So I'm like, all right, I want to be Mojo Jojo because he's like the next best weirdo character guy that's totally fun to be. And I went online and I saw that all the Mojo Jojo costumes were terrible. Sorry, internet, you didn't do a good job. It would be guys that, like someone who looks like me with like a monkey face and a little brain hat. Like, that's not what Mojo Jojo looks like. He doesn't look at all like a human. So this costume, this whole mask is like down to my knees. Like my head is way up in the brains. The end of the brains, like right around the eyes are right around my crotch. And then the mouth is down by my knees. And that way when I'm in it, my arms are like this, and so the proportions are correct. And so so that was 2010. And my personal YouTube, which I think is just Rick Shick, I have the 2010 Halloween video that we made where Buttercup teams up with Buzz Lightyear and Spider-Man because she can't find her sisters. And then they beat up Mojo Jojo and throw him into space. But, because it's all my kids. And so my one kid wanted to be Buzz Lightyear and one wanted to be Spider-Man. So I'm like, okay, you guys are going to be working together. So that was 2010. And then in 2014, at that point, I had moved to New Jersey and I was working in the New York market. A bunch of my friends were going to the 2014 Comic-Con and I had worn my Mojo Jojo costume to work. And they're like, oh my gosh, you got to wear it to Comic-Con. You got to do it. I'm like, maybe. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. So I actually improved the costume. I got better gloves. My wife sewed me a nice cape. I got go-go boots from the online transvestite store because it's the only place I could find it. So I mean, the boots were totally freaking awesome. Because before that, I just had sneakers with like cardboard, to be boots. So I upgraded the costume in every way I could, and then I went to the New York Comic-Con in 2014. And I ran into a guy dressed as the Joker who was doing interviews. He's like, can I interview you? I'm like, of course you can. And actually, if you find that online, if you type in Joker interviews Mojo Jojo, it might come up. If you type in Nerd Caliber, you'll find it. Two of my buddies are in the background and you can see them just like kind of watching like, because if you're in a costume like this where you have limited visibility, and you have a pole sticking out, that's going to poke people, like you can't go do that by yourself. You have to be with someone else to kind of keep an eye on you because, you know, I'm going to hit people and some people might get mad and I can't tell what's going on. But you do, when you're in a costume like this, you do get away with a lot because people expect you to be a jerk because you're Mojo Jojo. So you just, you know, run around and insult people and yell at them. It's great.
Anybody else? Any questions?
What about you, Demi? What about you?
So, Rick, I do have a question. What was
Go ahead.
it like on the last day of production for you, visual effects wise, when the the second season was done for you? What was that like for you? What was the emotions going through your head when that ended?
For Zio?
Yeah.
When Zio ended?
Yeah. What was your emotions as a visual effects?
You know what? It just seemed like there was just more and more and more of the same. It really didn't seem that different because it seemed like one giant season of Saban. The biggest difference would be like DF Troopers kind of felt like more of the same. Beetleborgs felt different because we were allowed even more freedom and it was way goofier in tone than, you know, as goofy as Power Rangers was. Like I didn't always see a lot of the Bulk and Skull stuff because we'd occasionally watch the show while we were eating dinner because we worked at night, and we'd get a buffet dinner and sit down and watch it, but we didn't always watch it. And I think by Zio, I probably wasn't even watching the episodes anymore. So I don't know. It just seemed like more of the same back then. Sorry, I hope that doesn't.
I appreciate your answer. It's an honest answer.
2 more questions and then we have to end the show.
Yep, and we got 2 people, so evens out. Kitty first, and then after Kitty, we'll go to Raphael. Christy, what is your question?
So I heard that you did a production of my favorite childhood TV show called Charm. What is it like doing the special effect during the production of Charm?
So on Charmed, that's when I was working staff at Modern Video Film, which is where we did the Saban shows, Power Rangers. And at one point I switched from night shift to day shift, and that freed me up to work night as a freelancer at other facilities. So by the time I did Charmed, I'd already switched to days. I probably wasn't doing a lot of Power Rangers at Modern Video Film anymore. I was on some of their other projects. And Charmed was a project at a facility called Encore. So that was another post-production house. And back then, some of the houses were so busy, they'd have a day shift running and then they'd hire freelancers at night. So I went there at night and I worked on more than a few episodes of Charmed. I think I worked on season 1. The one memory I have, well, no, I think I have 2 memories. One, I'm not sure it's Charmed, but it probably was Charmed, was some sort of a devil guy in like a long, like either dark red or dark brown robe. And there's like a little pot of fire and he kind of comes out of the fire. And I remember liking that effect a lot because we would shoot elements of dust and explode, like tiny explosions and sparks and things that we would reuse over and over again. And with that one, we had a room full of dust. And I remember I took a giant card and I went like this, whoosh, and it made the dust swirl in like a really interesting way. And I ended up reusing that dust again and again in the 90s. And it'd be funny to find like the provenance of that dust element in like how many 90s TV shows it was in. But in this particular instance, I used that dust to like the fire gets a little bit bigger and then a bunch of embers come out. So I basically, with some color correction and some trickery, I turned the dust into looking like embers. But it had this really nice like swirly flow to it. And that revealed the guy. And I thought that was really cool. I'm thinking that's Charmed. The one that I know is Charmed for sure was there was some guy who was a ghost or invisible and like a bike went through him. And I think that's the first thing I ever did on Charmed, which is probably why I have a memory of it. But I couldn't tell you what episode it was or who the character was. I know it was a guy, so I know it wasn't one of the main characters, but maybe it was a love interest or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for your question, Christy. Thank you for your answer, Rick. And our last question of the evening goes to the one and only Raphael. What is your question?
I'll tell you, I did see that interview you had with Joker, and I did find what he asked you kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, right. It was fun.
And he said, "You basically fight little girls."
He kill you. No guy kill you.
But my question is, what effects did you do for Sammy Raimi's Spider-Man?
Oh my goodness gracious. So I didn't work on Spider-Man. I worked on Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. I tried to work on Spider-Man 1. That was that's my favorite failure story. Is I actually I started at Sony ImageWorks the day that they announced that Sony was going to be making the Spider-Man movie. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I want to make a Spider-Man movie. That's my idea. So I actually used to be athletic, and I used to swing on the rings at the beach in Santa Monica, traveling rings where you go from ring to ring to ring. So a buddy and I went and shot me swinging on the rings because I thought, oh, this will be cool. I can give them some some reference to look at, and hopefully that's my toe into the door to help figure out how Spider-Man's going to move and what he's going to look like, and I can help composite and help maybe design how he's flying around. And I gave it to it was a VHS tape, and I gave it to my boss, the head of my department. I'm like, can you give this to the Spider-Man folks? And she's like, do you really want me to? Because people didn't generally do that. And I'm like, yes, because I don't know them. They don't know me. I need to do something to get noticed by them, I'm thinking. But apparently they got the tape and they're like, yeah, keep this guy away from us. Because I'm like talking out of turn. Like, who's this compositor thinking he knows animation and movement and things? It's like, well, I know how to swing on the rings. Like, we even have a move that's called the Spider-Man. So they did not like what I gave them, but I'm glad I did it, because if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't know. I put together the tape. I even edited it so that it flowed and made sense. And I put some Spider-Man music on it, the Ramones doing the Spider-Man song, and then gave it to them. And they, like I said, they totally rejected it. So I did not work on Spider-Man 1. Spider-Man 2, I had been at Sony long enough. Then they wanted me to work on Spider-Man 2, the production team. So I worked on the bank scene where Doc Ock pulls the door off the wall and then throws it, and it smashes between Peter and Aunt May, and they go flying side to side. I worked on that, and when Doc Ock is done coming awake, and it's the horror movie in the surgery room. When that horror movie's over and he goes out onto the street and he throws a cab, that was all shot at Sony Studios, which is clearly not New York. And so I put the buildings in the background and had to make it match the camera move, which now would be a lot easier to do. The computer would track the camera for you. But back then you had to do a lot of the animation of those elements by hand.
And that's why you are.
Spider-Man 3, I worked on the Mudman. I redid the Mudman shot when Sandman gets blasted with water and then he reforms on the shore and he comes up. Initially in the different releases, as the movie was released in different countries, it started out, it was basically just a wipe from a CG mud guy to Thomas Hayden Church. And each time it would be released in another venue or in another country, the effect would be a little bit better. There were two shots that Sam Raimi wanted to be better. And one was the Sandman first coming together, because that was a super complex, really long, super ambitious shot. And then the Mudman one, he never liked the CG mud guy. The mud guy had been outsourced to another company that wasn't Sony. And so when I got the call to work on Spider-Man 3, I'm like, I just saw that this weekend in the theater. So how am I going to work on it? but it was for the DVD release, for the Blu-rays and all that stuff. I was the last artist to be working on that movie for that scene. And I took that shot, and basically the Mudman never lined up with Thomas Hayden Church, which was the main problem to begin with. And I basically cut the CG all apart into pieces and then reanimated them so that it would line up, so I could do a nice blend of like Thomas Hayden Church drying out. And there's like little spots that dry and then steam comes off it. Like he's like squeezing the water out of himself. And that was probably, I think I did a 27-hour day the last day. They're like, are you almost done? And it's like, I'm doing paint fixes now, so I can stop whenever you tell me to stop. But that was a very intense couple of weeks to redo that last shot.
All right. And that's why you are who you are, Rick, because you
Right.
are a legend. We want to give a special thanks to the great Rick Shick for participating in this exciting interview on the Power Rangers Multiverse Rangers podcast. Rick, this is the time now where we allow you to promo your social medias, wherever you're at.
Yeah, baby. Let's do it. So I actually just bought the website behindthepower.com.
Awesome.
So we're going to be putting stuff there. But for right now on YouTube, it's Behind the Power VFX.
Links will be in the bottom.
And then F and then X. All right, cool. With Rick Shick. And we have episode 1 is me and Hunter Dino talking about morphs. Episode 2 is me and my buddy Vic talking about, what are we talking about? We're talking about the Zord transformation from Dinozord to Thunderzords. Mm-hmm. And one of the putty fights with I believe the Sinister Simian. And then third episode is going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. And I interviewed the adult, wait, what is it? Oh man, I feel so bad. Paul, he's a cool guy. The Reluctant Adult Podcast. So I interview him and we talk about the toys and how the toys are used in the show and stuff. So, and we got plenty more coming. Got an interview with Hector David Jr. coming up, and with my buddy Devontae. It's going to be awesome. So there's already stuff to see and more stuff coming.
Any place you're going to be in the near future?
Power Morphicon has reached out to me, but I haven't gotten an email with when it is or what they expect. So okay. I'm waiting to hear from them, what the story is, but they did reach out to me saying, hey, we want you to come. And I'm like, great, let me know what the story is.
All right.
Fingers crossed that he goes, Woods. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
At the date of this recording, he's already been at Ranger Stop and Pop, so we already know about that story. Yep. So with that being said, guys, Rick, thank you so much for showing up on the podcast. We've had a lot of fun. This is a very, very interesting, and props on the Mojo Jojo in the background there, man.
I love it.
Right. Yeah, right. The proportions are right. It's like, come on.
So from all of us, the Power Rangers Multiverse Rangers podcast, we want to say good night, good morning, wherever you are in the world. We know the boss is in the morning, so.
And have a more phenomenal, fantastic week.
We got some putties to smash. We got other stuff to do. So let's get out of here, Rangers.
See ya.
It's morphin' time.
See ya.
Effects artist, and I'm here with the Power Rangers Multiverse Ranger podcast. Watch us, listen to us, like us, join us, click us, smash us, whatever it is. Do what you kids do.